Okay, ever scroll through those Ancestry DNA results and wonder how they pinpoint your heritage with such precision?
Or maybe you're just baffled by your nephew's uncanny resemblance to your great aunt.
We're about to unlock those mysteries because today's deep dive is all about inheritance.
How traits are passed down through generations.
Exactly.
And what's fascinating is that we're not just talking about physical attributes like eye color or height,
Right.
but also predispositions to certain diseases, even behavioral tendencies.
Yeah.
It's like this hidden code within us shaping who we are.
Exactly. And like any good code, it needs a legend to decipher it, and that's where our main source for today comes in. This chapter on the principles of inheritance and variation.
Yeah.
It takes us back to the roots of genetics, back to a time when a monk named Gregor Mendel was meticulously experimenting with pea plants,
He had no idea.
completely unaware that he was about to revolutionize our understanding of heredity.
Mendel's work is a fantastic example of how seemingly simple experiments can lead to groundbreaking discoveries.
Yeah.
See, back in the 1850s, the prevailing theory was blending inheritance, which suggested that traits from parents simply mix together in their offspring, like blending paint. But Mendel's pea plants told a different story.
Hold on, if my dad's tall, my mom's short, I didn't just magically appear at a perfect medium height. My understanding of my entire existence is crumbling.
Not quite. But it's easy to see why blending inheritance was so appealing. It seems intuitive.
Right.
But let's get back to those pea plants. Mendel chose them for a reason, and it wasn't just because they were easy to cultivate in the monastery garden. Pea plants have this incredible ability to self-fertilize, which means they can act as both mom and dad, producing offspring that are essentially clones of themselves.
So he had a whole army of genetically identical pea plants at his disposal.
Yeah.
That's some next-level gardening right there.
Precisely. He called these his true breeding plants. But here's where it gets really interesting. Mendel then started crossbreeding these true breeding plants, selecting traits that had distinct variations. For instance, he looked at flower color, whether it was purple or white. No in-between shades to complicate things.
It's like he was setting up a controlled experiment with these pea plants.
Exactly. And by carefully tracking these crosses over generations, counting the different types of offspring he observed, he started noticing patterns that completely contradicted the idea of blending inheritance.
Okay, let's break it down. Say he crossed a true breeding purple-flowered plant with a true breeding white-flowered one. What would blending inheritance predict for the offspring?
If we were blending paint, we'd expect all the offspring to have pale purple flowers, right?
Right.
A mix of the two.
Makes sense. So what did Mendel see instead?
Instead of pale purple, all the offspring in that first generation had purple flowers, just like one of the parents. It was as if the white trait had completely vanished.
So much for blending. This is where those famous Mendelian laws come in, right?
You got it. Mendel proposed that traits were determined by these discrete factors, which we now call genes, and that these factors came in pairs, with one copy inherited from each parent.
Okay, so we each get a set of genes from our mom and a set from our dad. But if the first generation all had purple flowers, where did the instructions for white flowers go?
That's the million-dollar question. And it led Mendel to his first law of inheritance, the law of dominance. He realized that even though those first-generation plants all had purple flowers, they must have been carrying the factor for white flowers somewhere within them, hidden from view.
It's like a secret ingredient that didn't make it into the final recipe this time around, but could still be passed down to the next generation.
A perfect analogy. Mendel proposed that some versions of these factors, what we now call alleles, are dominant over others. So even if a plant inherited one allele for purple flowers and one for white, the purple allele would dominate, masking the expression of the white allele.
So in this case, purple is the bossy sibling, always getting its way, while white is the quieter one, whose presence is only felt when paired with another quiet one.
That's a great way to put it. It's not that the white allele disappears, it's just that its instructions aren't being followed when paired with a dominant purple allele. And this realization was key to understanding why those seemingly lost traits could reappear in later generations.
All right, so we've got these dominant alleles acting like the stars of the genetic show.
Right.
But what happens to those recessive alleles?
Yeah.
Do they just fade into the background noise?
Yeah, Not quite.
Never to be heard from again.
Remember those first-generation plants that Mendel crossbred?
Yeah.
They all had purple flowers, but
Yeah.
were carrying that hidden recessive allele for white.
Mm-hmm.
Mendel's next move was to self-fertilize these plants,
Wow.
letting them play the role of both parent.
Yeah.
And that's where things got really interesting.
Okay, I'm picturing a botanical soap opera here. What happened next? Did those white flowers make a dramatic reappearance?
More dramatic than you might expect. In that second generation, a quarter of the plants surprised everyone by producing white flowers.
Wow.
It was as if the recessive allele had been lying in wait, finally getting a chance to express itself.
Wow. Talk about a plot twist. So how did Mendel explain those white flowers popping up, seemingly out of nowhere?
This is where his second law, the law of segregation, comes in.
Okay.
Mendel deduced that when these plants reproduce, the allele pairs they carry don't actually blend or stay together.
Right.
Instead, they separate or segregate from each other,
Okay.
with each parent contributing just one allele to their offspring.
So it's like each parent gets to pick one allele from their genetic wardrobe to pass down, and there's no guarantee which one they'll choose.
Exactly. And to make it even more random, there's no way to know which allele from each parent will end up pairing up in their offspring.
Oh, wow.
It's like a giant genetic lottery.
Okay, this is where my brain usually starts to hurt. But I have a feeling you're about to introduce us to that handy tool that helps visualize all of this. The Punnett square.
You read my mind. Punnett squares are our way of keeping track of these genetic possibilities.
Right.
They help us visualize those allele combinations and understand the probability of different traits appearing in the offspring.
So in Mendel's pea plant experiment, when those second-generation plants were self-fertilizing, the Punnett square shows us that there's a 1 in 4 chance of getting 2 recessive alleles for white flowers, resulting in a white-flowered plant.
Precisely. And it also explains why the other 3/4 of those second-generation plants had purple flowers.
Right.
They each inherited at least one dominant purple allele.
This is all starting to make sense. But before we move on, let's rewind for a second.
Okay.
We keep talking about dominant and recessive alleles as if those are the only two options.
Yeah.
Is it always that black and white?
Great question. Mendel's work laid a phenomenal foundation,
Uh-huh.
but as we've discovered, genetics is rarely that simple.
Okay.
It turns out there are other ways these alleles can interact,
Right.
and the results aren't always so clear-cut.
Okay, spill the tea. What other genetic shenanigans are we talking about?
Let's take a detour from pea plants and venture into the vibrant world of snapdragons.
Okay.
You've probably seen them. They come in those gorgeous shades of red, pink, and white.
Oh, yes. They're like the stars of the flower garden.
Yeah.
But what makes their genetics so special?
Well, imagine crossing a true breeding red snapdragon with a true breeding white one.
Okay.
What would you expect based on what we've learned about dominant and recessive alleles?
Let me think. If red was dominant, then all the offspring would be red.
Right, a logical assumption. But in this case, something really intriguing happens.
Okay.
Instead of all red offspring, you end up with a garden full of pink snapdragons.
Pink. So it's like the red and white alleles decided to meet in the middle and compromise.
Exactly. This is a perfect example of what we call incomplete dominance, where neither allele completely masks the other.
Oh.
Instead, they blend their effects, resulting in an intermediate phenotype.
So it's less like a dominant recessive dictatorship and more like a power-sharing agreement.
Precisely. And it's not just snapdragons that exhibit this kind of inheritance. Like,
Right.
think about human hair texture.
Yeah.
We don't just see straight hair or curly hair.
Right.
There's a whole spectrum in between wavy, coily, kinky, all influenced by how these alleles interact.
So it's not always as simple as on or off for a gene. Sometimes it's more like a dimmer switch.
Absolutely. And just when you thought you had a handle on this whole allele interaction thing, we have yet another twist in the tale, codominance.
Okay, hit me with it. What's codominance all about?
Imagine two equally strong-willed individuals, both refusing to back down.
Okay.
That's kind of what happens in codominance. Both alleles are expressed equally, with neither one masking the other.
So no more blending.
Right.
It's like each allele gets to be the star of the show.
Exactly. And the perfect example of this is something we all have, our blood type.
Wait, blood types and genetics are connected.
Yes.
Now I'm really interested.
It all comes down to those A, B, and O blood groups you might be familiar with.
Great.
They're determined by a single gene. But
Yeah.
here's the catch. That gene has 3 possible alleles, not just 2.
Hold on, I thought we were working with pairs here. One allele from mom, one from dad.
Right.
How do 3 alleles fit into this equation?
You're right. We still inherit only 2 alleles, one from each parent.
Okay.
But the possibilities expand because we now have 3 alleles in the mix, IA, IB, and I.
Okay, I'm trying to keep up. So
Yeah.
how do these 3 alleles determine our blood type?
IA and IB are like those codominant powerhouses we were talking about.
Okay.
If you inherit one IA and one IB allele, boom, you've got both A and B antigens on your red blood cells, giving you the AB blood type.
So it's not a blending of A and B, it's literally having both. What about that I allele you mentioned? Where does it fit into all of this?
Good question. The I allele is like that quiet recessive friend in the corner.
Okay.
It's only expressed if you inherit 2 copies of it.
Right.
So someone with blood type O has 2 alleles.
Okay, this is all making sense now. But before we get too far down the rabbit hole of blood types, I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the complexities of inheritance, right?
You're absolutely right. We've only just scratched the surface.
Right.
Stay tuned because things are about to get even wilder.
So we've explored this intricate world of genes and alleles,
Right.
but where are all these instructions actually stored?
Yeah.
It's like having a whole library of recipes,
Uh-huh.
but we need to find the right cookbook.
Exactly. And that's where chromosomes come, in those tightly packaged bundles of DNA that reside within the nucleus of almost every cell in our bodies.
Right.
They're like those cookbooks, each one containing a specific set of recipes or genes that determine our traits.
And we inherit these chromosomes from our parents, one set from mom and one set from dad, which explains why we're a mishmash of their characteristics.
Right.
But it gets even more interesting when you consider that not all chromosomes are created equal.
Yes.
Some determine our sex.
Absolutely. Amidst the 23 pairs of chromosomes we inherit, one pair stands out, the sect chromosomes.
Okay.
These come in 2 flavors, X and Y.
Okay, time for a quick refresh. Females have 2 X chromosomes, while males have 1 X and 1 Y.
Right.
But how do these chromosomes actually determine whether someone develops as male or female?
It's all about that Y chromosome.
Okay.
You can think of it as the ultimate boy code. If a sperm carrying a Y chromosome fertilizes the egg, the presence of that Y chromosome sets off a cascade of events leading to the development of male characteristics.
And if an X-carrying sperm wins the race to the egg,
Right.
it's a girl.
Exactly.
It's incredible how much hinges on that one chromosome.
It really is.
But something's been bugging me.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier that a single gene can sometimes influence multiple traits.
Yeah.
How does that even work?
Yeah.
It's like one recipe producing a whole meal.
You're talking about pleiotropy.
Okay.
And it's a fascinating phenomenon that highlights just how interconnected our biological processes are. It's not always as simple as one gene, one trait.
Right.
Sometimes a single gene can play multiple roles in different pathways.
Can you give me an example? My brain needs a concrete image to latch onto.
Let's take the example of sickle cell anemia, a genetic disorder that affects red blood cells.
Okay.
It's caused by a mutation in a single gene responsible for producing hemoglobin, the protein that carries oxygen in our blood.
Okay, so a mutation in the hemoglobin gene.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But how does that lead to all the different symptoms associated with sickle cell anemia?
That's the thing about pleiotropy, that single mutation triggers a chain reaction.
Okay.
The altered hemoglobin protein distorts the shape of red blood cells, making them rigid and sickle-shaped.
Okay.
These misshapen cells can then clog blood vessels, leading to a whole cascade of problems, pain, organ damage, increased susceptibility to infections, and more.
Wow, so one tiny change can have such far-reaching effects. It's mind-boggling how much complexity can arise from even a single gene gone awry.
It is.
Which makes me think about all those other genetic disorders we hear about.
Right.
What causes those?
Well, some disorders, like sickle cell anemia, are caused by mutations in single genes and are often inherited in predictable patterns like the ones Mendel described.
Right.
We call those Mendelian disorders.
Okay.
But others, known as chromosomal disorders, arise from errors in the number or structure of chromosomes themselves.
It's like having an extra page or a missing paragraph in that genetic cookbook, right?
Yeah.
That could really mess things up.
Exactly. Down syndrome is a classic example.
Okay.
It occurs when an individual inherits an extra copy of chromosome 21.
Right.
This trisomy 21, as it's called, leads to a range of developmental and physical characteristics.
It's amazing how much we're learning about these genetic disorders,
Yeah.
but it also makes you think about the ethical implications.
Right.
If we can pinpoint these genetic variations,
Yeah.
Where do we draw the line?
That's the million-dollar question. As we delve deeper into the human genome, unraveling the secrets of our genetic code, we're also faced with profound ethical considerations.
Right.
It's a conversation that society needs to have as we venture further into the era of genetic testing, gene editing, and personalized medicine.
It's both exciting and a little daunting, isn't it?
It is.
This deep dive into inheritance has been eye-opening. We've gone from those simple pea plants in Mendel's garden to the complexities of human genetic disorders.
Right.
And it's clear that there's still so much more to uncover.
Absolutely. Genetics is a rapidly evolving field, and with every new discovery, we gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the intricate mechanisms that make us who we are.
It's a reminder that we're all part of this incredible tapestry of life, connected by this invisible thread of inheritance that binds us across generations. So next time you see a family resemblance, ponder the intricate dance of genes that made it so. You've just got to love the elegant complexity of it all.